The sand seemed to cut through the skin that day. The wind blew relentlessly, scattering dust that seeped into every crevice of the equipment and onto the exhausted faces of the soldiers. The Afghan desert was unforgiving, a scene that mixed scorching heat, mounting tension, and a constant sense that something could go wrong at any moment. But there was a beacon of light and hope in that patrol. Lucca, the military dog who led the group with firm purpose. Lucca was agile and experienced, every movement meticulously calculated. Her stride was confident, her tail raised like a flag of determination. Despite being just a dog, she took on the most dangerous role, leading the way, sniffing the ground and the air for explosives or deadly traps. Her work made the difference between life and death for the soldiers who followed her. To many, Lucca was more than just a team member. She was a four-legged guardian angel. Sergeant Chris Willingham, who was right behind her, watched every step with a heavy heart. He and Lucca had formed an inseparable partnership over the years. Chris knew how to read every signal, every subtle movement of the dog. When she hesitated, he hesitated. When she advanced, he knew the path was safe. It was as if there was an invisible connection between the two, a trust so strong that words were unnecessary. Suddenly, Lucca stopped. Her ears, which had been relaxed before, now perked up like antennas catching a distant signal. Her snout pointed directly to the ground, and she raised a paw in the air, the universal gesture indicating danger. Chris felt his stomach sink. All the soldiers froze in place, exchanging nervous glances. Breathing became heavier, and the silence that followed was almost unbearable. "Everyone back," Chris ordered in an urgent whisper, as Lucca took a few steps forward, sniffing more intently. The sound of her steps on the sand seemed to echo in the void. He knew this moment was critical. The dog was trying to pinpoint the exact location of a possible improvised explosive device, the kind of weapon that had claimed so many lives and mutilated countless bodies during the war. The soldiers kept their distance, watching Lucca with anxious eyes. She was the team's invisible shield, and every second she spent sniffing the terrain was a second of unbearable tension. Chris, however, knew he had to trust her. He had witnessed countless times the dog's incredible ability to save lives. But even knowing this, fear crept into his mind. What if, this time, something went wrong? Then it happened. Lucca stopped again, stiffened her body, and gave the definitive signal. Chris knew immediately, danger was right there. He shouted for everyone to retreat, and the soldiers obeyed instantly. The dog remained still, staring at the spot as if she could see through the ground. But before any action could be taken, the sound everyone feared tore through the air, a deafening explosion that sent sand and shrapnel flying in all directions. In that moment, the world seemed to freeze. Lucca was no ordinary dog. Since she was a puppy, she had demonstrated unique traits, a keen sense of smell, an impressive intelligence, and an energy that seemed inexhaustible. Born and raised to be a warrior, she was carefully chosen to participate in one of the most challenging training programs in the world, the United States Marine Corps' military dog program. It was the beginning of a journey that would transform her into a true legend. During her training, Lucca demonstrated exceptional abilities. She not only mastered basic commands but seemed to anticipate what was expected of her. Alongside her trainers, Lucca learned to detect improvised explosive devices, IEDs, landmines, and traps, frequently used by enemies to attack American troops. This work required absolute precision. One mistake could be fatal. But Lucca was flawless. Her focus and determination impressed even the most experienced instructors. Beyond her natural talent, Lucca had a personality that won over everyone around her. She was affectionate and charming off-duty, but on the battlefield, she transformed into a serious and focused professional. Her presence brought not only security but also comfort. Many soldiers, engulfed by the stress and brutality of war, found solace in Lucca. Just seeing her walk among them, her tail wagging slightly, made them feel a little more human amidst the chaos. Among those who admired her the most was Sergeant Chris Willingham, her trainer and combat partner. From the moment he was assigned to work with Lucca, Chris realized she was special. He often said she wasn't just a four-legged Marine, but his teammate, confidant, and in many moments, his protector. The bond between the two was palpable. Chris knew every expression of Lucca, every movement of her ears, every subtle change in her posture. He could tell when she was relaxed and when something worried her. In the years that followed, this partnership would be tested countless times. Lucca and Chris participated in some of the most dangerous missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. They patrolled mine-laden terrain, abandoned villages, and deserted roads, always under the invisible threat of an explosive waiting to strike. For many soldiers, each step felt like a leap of faith. But when Lucca led the patrol, tension eased. They trusted her in a way few humans could understand. Over 6 years of service, Lucca took part in more than 400 combat missions. She located dozens of hidden explosives and saved countless lives. Perhaps most impressively, throughout her time on the battlefield, no soldier under her protection ever lost their life. Her success rate was impeccable, and she became a true legend among the Marines. Whenever Lucca was at the base, she was treated like a celebrity, receiving pets, playful interactions, and even extra treats as thanks for her flawless work. But despite her bravery and professionalism, Lucca also carried the emotional weight of her role. Each mission was a reminder of life's fragility. She could sense the fear and nervousness of the soldiers around her, and it seemed as though she absorbed some of it herself. Yet she never hesitated. Whenever called upon to lead a patrol, Lucca was ready, driven by an almost supernatural sense of duty. To Chris, it was as if she truly understood the purpose of her mission, to protect lives, no matter the cost. However, even for a heroine like Lucca, the war would take its toll. The mission in Afghanistan that nearly cost her life would be the greatest challenge of her career and the ultimate test of her courage and loyalty. But, as always, Lucca was ready to face whatever came her way, with the determination of one born to be more than just a dog. She was born to be a symbol of hope amid the shadows of war. The sound of the explosion was deafening, as if the very ground had cried out in pain. The shockwaves scattered sand and shrapnel in every direction, while the soldiers instinctively ducked, shielding their faces with their arms. Chris Willingham, who was closest to Lucca, felt the impact reverberate through his entire body, but his heart stopped when he saw the dog's figure thrown backward, enveloped in dust and debris. In that instant, the world seemed to slow down. "Lucca!" Chris's shout echoed, but it was as if no sound existed in that moment of pure chaos. He ran toward his partner without a second thought, ignoring the risk of a second explosive. The soldiers yelled for him to stop, but Chris could hear nothing but the frantic pounding of his own heart. The image of Lucca lying on the ground consumed his mind, and he knew he had to reach her, no matter the danger. When he finally reached her side, Chris saw what he had feared most. Lucca was alive but gravely injured. One of her front limbs had been severely damaged by the explosion, and there were small cuts and burns across her body. She lay trembling in the sand, but when she noticed Chris's presence, her eyes lit up briefly. With visible effort, she tried to lift her head and, in an almost impossible gesture amidst the pain, licked her trainer's hand. It was as if she were saying, "I'm here. Don't give up on me." Chris fell to his knees beside her, tears mixing with the dust on his face. He held her body carefully, pressing his hand against the site of the improvised amputation to try to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me, girl. You're going to be okay. I promise." His voice was choked with emotion, but his determination was firm. He knew every second was crucial. The other soldiers, finally snapping out of their shock, approached to offer support. The battlefield, previously marked by tense silence, was now overtaken by the frantic urgency of saving the dog who had so often saved them. Lucca, even injured, seemed to maintain her warrior's demeanor. She didn't cry or resist. She only looked at Chris with the same trust she had always shown during every mission they had faced together. She knew she was in good hands. The soldiers quickly set up a security perimeter while Chris carried Lucca in his arms toward the nearest evacuation point. Each step felt like an eternity, but he didn't stop. His boots sank into the sand, his arms trembling under the combined weight of the dog and his despair, but he pressed on. He knew he couldn't lose her, not after everything they had been through together. In the evacuation helicopter, as Lucca was stabilized, Chris never let go of her paw. He whispered words of encouragement, recalling the happy moments they had shared and promising that somehow they would get through this. "You're a hero, Lucca. You always have been. And we're going to make it home together." The explosion had been a cruel reminder that even for the bravest, the battlefield never forgives. But in that moment, There was no doubt for Chris or for the soldiers who had witnessed Lucca's sacrifice. She had given her all once again. And thanks to her, lives were spared. Without a shadow of a doubt, she was a hero, not only for her work but for the unwavering loyalty she had shown until the very last second of that fateful day. In the evacuation helicopter, the sound of the rotor blades was deafening, but Chris heard nothing except Lucca's labored breathing. She lay on an improvised stretcher, bandages tightly wrapped around what remained of her front paw, while a medical team worked to stabilize her. Her eyes were half closed, but she still seemed alert, occasionally lifting her head toward Chris as if seeking comfort. He held her paw tightly, unable to hold back the tears streaming down his face. "You're strong, girl. I know you can get through this. Just a little longer, Lucca. We're almost there." The journey to the medical base was quick, but for Chris, it felt like an eternity. He never took his eyes off Lucca, fearing that this might be the last moment they shared together. Every movement of her breathing was a victory. When they finally landed, the medical team was already prepared to act. Lucca was taken to the medical tent, and Chris tried to follow, but he was stopped. "Let us take care of her. We'll do our best," the doctors said as they disappeared with the dog down the narrow corridor. Chris stayed outside the tent, pacing back and forth like a caged lion. He tried to prepare himself for the worst, but the thought of losing Lucca was unbearable. She wasn't just his combat partner, she was his family. For 6 years, Lucca had been by his side, facing the dangers of the battlefield, sharing moments of tension, joy, and even despair. She wasn't just a dog, she was the living embodiment of loyalty, courage, and unconditional love. The next few hours were the longest of Chris's life. He felt the weight of each passing second as the doctors worked to save Lucca's life. The explosion had caused severe injuries, and the amputation of her front paw was unavoidable. But the greatest fear was the trauma caused by the shock and the loss of blood. Everything depended on Lucca's resilience. And if there was one thing Chris knew about his companion, it was that she was a fighter. When the doctor finally emerged from the tent to deliver the news, Chris's heart almost stopped. The man approached slowly, removing his mask and wiping the sweat from his face. "She's going to live," he said with a small smile. "The amputation was successful, and she's out of immediate danger. But she will need time to recover. She lost a lot of blood and suffered severe injuries. It's going to be a long journey, but if there's any dog who can overcome this, it's Lucca." Chris felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over him. He collapsed onto a nearby bench, covering his face with his hands as sobs escaped him. She was alive. Against all odds, Lucca had survived. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but at that moment, nothing mattered more than the fact that his battle companion was still fighting. And he vowed to stand by her every step of this new challenge, just as she had always been by his side. When he was finally allowed to see her, Chris found Lucca lying on an improvised bed, with tubes connected to her body and bandages covering much of her injury. Even so, she lifted her head as he entered, and her tail wagged faintly, a gesture that brought a smile to Chris's face through his tears. He knelt beside her, gently stroking her head. "You did it, girl. You did it. I knew you were strong." At that moment, Chris swore he would do everything in his power to ensure Lucca had the peaceful and happy life she deserved, far from the sound of explosions and the dust of the battlefield. Lucca's return to the United States was an event filled with emotion. After weeks of recovery at military medical facilities, she was finally cleared to board a flight home. Despite still adjusting to the absence of her front leg, Lucca amazed everyone with her resilience. She was already moving with her usual determination, skillfully balancing on her 3 remaining limbs. For Chris, watching her recover so quickly was proof that nothing could break the spirit of that dog, not even a devastating explosion in the middle of a war. Upon arrival in the United States, Lucca was received as a true hero. A small ceremony was organized by her service colleagues, including soldiers, veterinarians, and her trainers. Many who had served alongside her made a point to be there to pay their respects. When Lucca stepped off the plane, wearing a specially made collar, the applause was instantaneous. Some soldiers who had fought alongside her in Afghanistan couldn't hold back their tears at the sight of her. To them, Lucca wasn't just a military dog, she was a symbol of sacrifice, courage, and loyalty. Chris stood by Lucca throughout the entire ceremony. He couldn't stop smiling as he watched his partner receive the recognition she so richly deserved. However, he knew this was only the first step in a new chapter of her life. Her mission on the battlefield was over, but Lucca's life was far from finished. Chris had already made a decision. He would adopt her and ensure her remaining days were filled with love and comfort. After the ceremony, Lucca began adapting to her retired life. She was taken to Chris's home, where, for the first time in years, she could enjoy a routine free of pressure and danger. Despite her new condition, Lucca quickly learned to move with ease. Within a few months, she was running around the yard, playing with other dogs, and even climbing stairs with an energy no one would have imagined for an animal that had endured so much. Every movement she made was a living testament to her strength and determination. Lucca's return also drew the attention of the media and organizations advocating for the rights of military dogs. In 2016, Lucca received one of the highest honors an animal could receive, the Dickin Medal, considered the Victoria Cross for animals. During the award ceremony, she walked alongside Chris, wearing her special prosthetic and an expression that seemed to radiate pride. The audience, made up of soldiers, veterans, and animal lovers, gave her a standing ovation. Chris, moved, declared, "Lucca is not just a military dog. She is my friend, my protector, and my inspiration. And it's an honor to stand by her to celebrate all she has achieved." With the medal on her chest and a new life ahead, Lucca found her place as a symbol of resilience and loyalty. Despite everything she had faced, she continued to inspire those around her with her energy and joy. And for Chris, each day by her side was a blessing, a constant reminder that, even in the darkest moments, sacrifice and unconditional love can light the way. Lucca's impact transcended the battlefield and entered history as one of the most powerful examples of courage and sacrifice. Her story was not just about a military dog who saved lives. It was about how loyalty and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals can change the fate of many. Lucca became a symbol of the strength of connections that transcend words, showing the world that love and trust do not require a shared language to be understood. After her retirement, Lucca was often invited to participate in military events and tributes. At each public appearance, she radiated a captivating energy, as if she were aware of her importance and the impact of her story. Children approached to pet her, veterans made a point of saluting her, and even those who had never served in the military were moved by her bravery. For many, Lucca was more than a military dog. She was a heroine who represented the courage and sacrifice of soldiers, both human and canine, who faced the horrors of war every day. One of Lucca's greatest legacies was her contribution to raising awareness about military dogs. Her story brought to light the crucial role these animals play in combat, but also highlighted the challenges they faced during and after service. Many began to question how these four-legged heroes were treated upon retirement, leading to a series of improvements in adoption policies and medical care for military dogs. Thanks to Lucca, several initiatives were launched to ensure that veteran dogs received the same respect and support as their human counterparts. For Chris Willingham, who remained by Lucca's side until the last day of her life, her greatest legacy was what she left in his heart. "Lucca taught me what it truly means to be courageous, what it means to sacrifice for something greater than yourself," he said in an interview years later. She didn't just save lives on the battlefield. She showed us the power of empathy, loyalty, and unconditional love. Even after her passing, Lucca's story continues to inspire. Her name is counted among the great military heroes, and her journey is remembered as a testament to the connection between humans and animals, a connection that can overcome any obstacle, even war. Lucca's legacy is not just found in medals or ceremonies, but in every heart her story touched and every life she changed forever.